Jack the Ripper is a serial killer, what we would call a serial killer, who killed at least 5 women. There's some debate about the total number in the Whitechapel area in East London in 1888. And so when she wrote her novel in 1913, it was fairly recent history. And it was very recent history for Hitchcock, too. He grew up in Leytonstone, which is about 6 miles northeast of Whitechapel. And so Jack the Ripper was, local legend for him. He was born in 1901. The Ripper carried out his attacks in 1888. So when Hitchcock was a child and a teenager, that was fairly recent history. So when the novel came out in 1913, he wasn't quite a teenager yet. He read it. And we also know that he and his family went to see the play that was adapted from the novel. The play appeared on stage in 1916. So we are certain that he was familiar with both the book and the novel, and they made a deep impression on him. Now, where did the idea to write this novel come from? Mrs. Bellaclown said that it originated in a conversation that she overheard at a dinner party. And she heard one of the guests say that they knew someone who had been a landlady who ran a boarding house at the time that Jack the Ripper was carrying out his crimes, and that this landlady had become afraid at that time that the Ripper might be one of her lodgers. And so this really interested Mrs. Bellacloun's, not so much the grisliness of his murders or the specifics of the crimes, but the psychological process of that landlady. What would it be like if you were running a boarding house and you suspected that one of your lodgers might be this mass criminal that everybody was talking about? What would you do? How would you figure it out? Where would you go to? What kind of moral conflicts would this present? So that is what interested her. And that is what we want to keep in mind as we read the novel, because the novel is very much about not the Ripper or the protagonist who's called the avenger in the novel. It's not about the criminal. It's about the effects of that criminal on this particular family, and in particular on the mother of the family. One critic writing recently have said that this novel is really about the infiltration of the criminal into domestic life. What happens when you have this domestic existence and the world of crime perhaps comes into it, begins to infiltrate your life? What happens then? Now, if you know Hitchcock's later film, Shadow of a Doubt, from 1943 with Joseph Cotten, you might say that the plots are very similar. And it's true, because that's also about someone who doesn't appear to be a criminal and comes to live with a family. And then gradually one member of the family, his niece, begins to wonder if maybe there's more going on here. So the interest in that film, as with The Lodger, is what's going on here. What are the processes? So that's the interesting subject. In fact, when the novel was published in the United States in 1914, the critic for the Chicago Tribune wrote that we read it to understand Mrs. Bunting's thought processes. What is she going through as she reasons this out? So it's really a novel about psychology as much as it is about crime. I would say more about psychology than it is about crime. And in that way, Marie Bellacloun connects with other modernist writers of the time, like Virginia Woolf and Henry James. This is later in James's life, early in Virginia Woolf's life, but both of them were prominent writers who were interested in the thought processes of their characters, not just their actions, but the thought processes. So that gives us something to keep in mind as we read the novel. In the next video, I like to offer some specific suggestions of things to look for. But what I'd like to do now is to leave you with a quote from an interview that she gave in 1936. She was asked why she thought that so many people like murder mysteries, some of us included, I think. And this is what she said. She said, many of us like mysteries because almost everyone is a potential criminal, and anyone might commit murder if the occasion arose. Opportunity, she said, makes the criminal. Now, that is a debatable idea, and I think it's one that we might want to talk about when we have our first live session. But it is fundamental to the novel. So I'm going to let you stew on that for a while and think about it as you read the novel. And then I'll look forward to seeing you during our first live session. Thank you very much.